Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Backwards K Baseball Podcast. I am your host Chris Asbrock, and wow, wow, oh boy, we are off to a flying start.
Zing!
Because I was starting to go like each and every week, and then I stopped myself because you got on me last time, and I was like, so then I just really fumbled it up. And I tell you what, this isn't good. But regardless, I'm Chris Asbrock, and I'm your host. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Scott Kaiser. My God.
What's up, dude? Let me fix my camera so that I'm not showing just randomness in the background.
I mean, we are off to a flying start today.
First time, long time over here.
I know. Well, what happened Monday, but work has completely kicked me right in the teeth, and I was down for the count a little bit, so it actually worked out perfect because kind of gave us a little more to talk about. But now the winter meetings are done, wrapped up last night from Dallas, and man, there's a lot we got to talk about.
There's a lot we got to talk about because we've been away for a little while, haven't done a show since Thanksgiving, and all of the stuff has happened. Unlike some of the past free agency years, once things got rolling here, they really got rolling, and we had some of the biggest dominoes falling at the top on both pitching and hitting. So why don't we just go on ahead and get right to it? Let's start off where we kind of think we left off, which was right around the time that Blake Snell signs with the Dodgers. So Blake Snell, one of the bigger names on the free agent market, 5 years, $182 million. The Dodgers get richer with their pitching. This was not unexpected, but slightly surprising in terms of names that had been floated about for the Dodgers. Snell wasn't one of the names at the top of the list, but it fits the profile of what they're looking for, which is more stable starting pitching. Even in the case of Snell, who tends to only go 5-6 innings max most games, he's a guy that, for the most part, stays healthy, which is what the Dodgers were lacking. But, hey, it didn't really matter when they were lacking it down the stretch last year and still won the World Series. So, rich get richer, add one of the better starting pitchers in the league, 5-year deal, a bunch of deferred money. But what do we think about Blake Snell signing with the Dodgers?
I'm honestly, I'm a little surprised. I was kind of figuring he was going to stay in San Francisco for one. It just kind of felt like that still was kind of the best fit, at least to me, because San Francisco needs pitching as well. But the Dodgers, I'm not a big Blake Snell guy, never really have been. The years he's won the Cy Young, he's been phenomenal, and every other year after that, it's just mediocre pitcher. And, the 5 years, 180, was it 82 or 83 million? To me,
182.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say to me, that seems like a slight overpay to me. Again, just because I'm not a Blake Snell guy. But when he's on, he's, like I said, he's hands down one of the better pitchers in the league. But overall, I just don't see that consistency. But Dodgers needed it, and he's a guy who's going to go out there and he's going to toe the mound every fifth day, and that's what they need. A guy who's going to eat up the innings, and he can do that. He did throw a no-hitter last year against Cincinnati here at Great American Ballpark. But other than that, I mean, it's a good deal for him. I mean, it's kind of got things going. Just prior to that, Kikuchi went off the board, so to me that wasn't. You had two left-handed pitchers going off the board relatively quickly. One to the Angels, and Kikuchi, and then the other to the Dodgers. So the Los Angeles markets definitely jumped quickly on two lefties. But yeah, to me it's just a okay signing. They're still loaded on the lineup wise. So that's how I'm looking at that. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know you were kind of.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about Blake Snell. I just dislike the fact that when he's on, he's on. I mean, he is Cy Young caliber when he's at his best. The problem is the consistency is all over the place. I mean, 1 minute he can look like he did against Cincinnati, throw a no-hitter, and then he can go a stretch for a month where he's got a 4-run ERA and can't get out of the third inning. But the Dodgers are in a unique position where they're just throwing him on the back end of what's already a stacked rotation. I mean, you got Yamamoto, you got Shohei this year. You've got all these guys already at the top. And if Blake Snell is like your 4, your 5, you're doing pretty good. I don't like Snell all that much myself. I think the money is fine. The deal's fine. But it just goes to show you that, when you've got as much money and resources as the Dodgers, you can throw Blake Snell at the end of your rotation. And I'm sure that they're just hoping for him to stay healthy. Like I said, there kind of isn't in his introduction. He's much more capable of that than some of the other guys they've got in their rotation. So if he can go out there every 5 days, that's a huge boon for them. So at the end of the season next year, they're not looking at the likes of having to bring up minor league guys just to get starts out of them.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing for them was the fact that they're not paying them to be an ace, like you had mentioned. So that's right. For them, it's perfect for the Dodgers. Any other team, he's going to be he's going to be the guy. And I don't think he's the guy on any other team. Dodgers perfect for him, and in the role he's set to play this year.
Yeah, and the Dodgers also extended Tommy Edman after they had traded for him at the deadline, which would kind of surprised some people because he was coming off of being injured for the entire year for the Cardinals. Looked pretty good in the final couple months there for the Dodgers, so they went on ahead and added 5 years and $74 million onto his contract. Nothing major, but I have a feeling, again, stability is the name of the game here for them because they've been moving Mookie between second base, shortstop, outfield, Rojas over there at shortstop. They've had trouble keeping guys healthy on their middle infield, and they've had to juggle a bunch of pieces. So I think this is, if you get a usually healthy Tommy Edman to stabilize things there, that's what this was for. It doesn't really move the needle a lot, but it's a solid move for an otherwise headline grabbing franchise.
Yeah, I mean it's a great deal for him. Great deal for Tommy Edman. He's a solid player. You know exactly what you're going to get. Really, nothing else. Nothing else to add on to that one.
Yeah, moving through just quickly on some of the other guys. Former Red last year, Frankie Montas signs with the Mets, 2 years, $34 million. The Cubs picked up Matthew Boyd after he became a free agent, coming back off of injury and pitching a little bit there for Cleveland at the end of the year. You mentioned a sneaky signing of the Rangers getting catcher Kyle Higashioka, 2 years and $13 million for that one. I'm gonna let you talk about that one because that one I remember when it happened, but I kind of forgot about it. It's kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it's a 2-year deal, $13.5 million with a mutual option. I like Higashioka. Once he got out of New York, out of the pinstripes, I just think he started to flourish a little bit. The pressure of being the catcher in New York, I think, was starting to get to him a little bit. But this one, you're adding solid depth to a Texas Rangers team that is, they're damn good. And, they made some moves that we're going to obviously talk about here pretty soon. But Texas, I like what they're doing, and they continue, to add solid pieces to that team. And Higashioka is one that it's a solid, stable move. And for 2 years, $13 million, why not? He's like I said, what you're going to get from him. And, any Bruce Bochy led team, what you're going to get in terms of it's going to be a solid baseball team. And this is just another solid player to add to it. And, good for Texas. But yeah, sneaky under the radar signing when I saw that. And I was like, okay. I see what Texas is doing. I like it.
So it gets the Chris approval. The next couple made me chuckle, and I'm assuming that they did the same to you. I know we've talked about pretty much all these signings, but I remember my reactions to both of them. That being the Red Sox signing Aroldis Chapman to just a 1 year, $10 million deal. And then of all teams, the homeless Athletics adding Luis Severino for 3 years and $67 million. The A's, not known to be players in free agency, they shockingly, in many ways, signed Luis Severino, who was fine for the Mets last year, had a little bit of a bounce back year. Wasn't great, but didn't, it didn't embarrass himself like he had the last couple of years. The A's, as we found out a little bit later, and if you're unaware, are more or less under a mandate to spend money this offseason because they're now getting revenue sharing money, and the Players Association was getting ready to have them in the crosshairs to file a grievance against them for not spending money. So take this signing with a grain of salt, but it's a very large number to see that the A's throw out there. What are your thoughts on Luis Severino signing with the A's?
Largest contract in A's history, 3 years, $67 million. I mean,
for Luis Severino.
I know, of all people. I mean, the funny part is, I remember like when it came down, you and I were like, we were texting each other. We're like, holy shit! Like, I mean, like, did we read that right? Like, did we see that dollar amount
with team,
that guy, like in that team? Like, it wasn't making any sense. But
I believe my exact words were, "Thanks a lot." Well, I mean, I would say Oakland, but not Oakland anymore. Thanks a lot, Athletics, for setting the market and messing. I believe I used the word "fuckered up" the market.
I think you did, actually.
Yeah, by throwing out $67 million to Luis Severino, like right out of the gates.
But you know what, though? In all seriousness, I like it because teams like, I keep wanting to say Oakland, teams like the Athletics, the Reds, for example, and many others have to overpay for a lot of these guys to come in.
Sure.
So I get it. I mean,
we can't have it. We can't have it both ways, right? Like, exactly. We can't sit here and say that teams like the A's and Pirates and all that have to spend money, and then when they do spend money, we can't, making fun of it. Right? Yeah, I can't get pissed at it, even though it kind of is annoying because they have to overpay for a guy like Luis Severino. It makes it so that some of the other guys get pushed up into the upper echelons and like into higher pay. Like, right. Yeah. It messes up the bell curve for the rest of the folks. So we'll get to some later. Maybe it screwed me over, maybe I should be blaming the A's for my misfortunes right now. We'll get to that in a minute, but I might, I'm going to use anything I can.
It's karma is what that is. It's totally
and then back to the Aroldis Chapman thing real quickly. I just laughed because it was just funny to see Chapman with yet another team. Hasn't he pitched for everybody now?
He's pretty much, he's touched down almost every single team in the majors right now.
That's good stuff. Moving along, Shane Bieber heads back to Cleveland. Re-signs 1-year deal with the Guardians. Solid there. Probably best for him coming off of the injury.
I was thinking, I was hoping, sorry to cut you off, Scott, but
no, you're good. Good.
I was hoping that was going to be a Red signing because of his relationship with Tito. I thought would have been a perfect signing, maybe a 2-year deal,
I think everybody kind of expected him to get a 2-year deal because coming off of Tommy John, this might be a rehab year. Or, you're only going to get half of a season out of him where he should pitch okay. And he goes back to a place where he's familiar. But I like Shane Bieber a lot. And, knowing that he finally got that elbow cleaned up meant that, this year's going to be a little bit of a comeback year, and you might not see the Shane Bieber that you're kind of used to or that he displayed just before he got injured. But I do think that whoever does end up locking him up, for over the next couple years is going to get a pretty good deal because once upon a time, he was Cy Young caliber, and then injuries kind of pulled him back to more of the middle of the pack, but still a guy that you can have up there, especially if you're Cleveland, near the top of your rotation and not have to necessarily worry about.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, with Bieber, he was one that, he was always connected to the Reds. It seemed like when it was trade talks, it was always Bieber to the Reds. And that's just how he was obviously connected in a bunch of other places, but the Reds were always linked at some point. And I kind of figured that, this would be a great way to finally, make it happen by, like I said, a 2-year, $25 million deal, somewhere along those lines to bring him in here, and because you know you're going to get him for at least a year and a half, and go from there. Especially with Tito as your manager, it's like perfect. I mean, it was to me the perfect marriage. But for him going back on a 1-year deal, kind of getting everything back in the groove for him, good for Cleveland and good for Shane Bieber.
Well, and honestly, I mean, on a 1-year deal, the reunion that you were just talking about, maybe you'll just get the Cleveland is paying for the rehab, and then the next team, which could be the Reds, is reaping the benefits of it, and that still makes a lot of sense.
True.
This time next year, if we're talking about Bieber potentially coming to Cincinnati, I could see that, because it's not like they're going to be not in need of pitching. Pretty much everybody this time of year is in need of pitching.
Never have too much pitching, as that stupid saying goes. So true.
Speaking of pitching, I'm going to gloss over this one because, one, I just don't care, and two, I don't think it's of much of consequence. But the Mets decided they're going to sign the Yankees closer Clay Holmes to a 3-year, nearly $40 million deal. They're converting him to a starter, and good luck. I don't really know what to say about that. I've not really been truthfully, I've not really seen much of Clay Holmes. I just know that he blew a lot of saves for the Yankees, and that made me smile. So the fact that he's going over to Queens and now becoming a starter, I hope that I get to see him firsthand blow a lot of starts for the Mets. That's about all I have to say about that.
I got nothing to add. I mean, Mets are always going to be in the market for pitching. So yeah, they went and got 1 or 2. I mean,
yeah, they did. They signed Montas. And so they're kind of replenishing that back end where they lost.
I was going to say they're pumping themselves full of 4 and 5 starters, man. Like
I'm not really sure why they're loading up on the back end, because the top end looks suspect.
It's kind of what you need help with. What the hell?
Especially after you lost Sean Manaea, who had a throwback resurgent year, and he's still out there as a free agent. So I mean, I guess they could bring him back, but these two, Montas and Holmes as replacement, seem like less than. But let's move on, because then things got real interesting. We had the first real big signing of the offseason. That was Willy Adames, one of the top hitters available, signs with the San Francisco Giants for 7 years, $182 million. Little bit of a surprise. We all know that the Giants have been trying and begging and pleading with anybody for the last 2 or 3 off seasons to please take their money. They've tried with every big name that you can think of. They've been in, seemingly in the final 2 for, I think, just about everybody but Ohtani, as far as big names over the last couple of years. They finally land their big fish in Willy Adames. Deal isn't crazy, but I got a lot of concerns about Adames going into that ballpark as a right-handed hitter, where it is very unfriendly to right-handed hitters as far as home runs go and power and all that. Adames obviously having a career year in his contract year with the Brewers and hitting 32 home runs. I feel like that number comes down, and this is Buster Posey's signature move so far, his first really big splash as the GM and head of baseball operations there in San Francisco. Your thoughts on Willy Adames to the Giants?
I was stunned by it. And it was kind of nice because, you kept hearing that the Yankees ran on him. And
yes, that was the best part about this deal, is that the Yankees didn't get him out.
Yeah, that was kind of my thing was, thank God. I mean, but I mean, the Giants, I was – good on them, because they had to spend money and they had to bring somebody of substance in. And it seems like you said, before, that they were always the bridesmaid, never the bride in each one of these years, it seemed like. And yeah, this time they finally got a good one. I mean, Willy Adames is good, but I don't know what to expect from him, there. Like you said, right-handed hitter, in that ballpark, it's tough. It is tough, but they got a solid player. I mean, they still got a lot of work to do to catch up with, the Diamondbacks, who are, I'd still would put them above San Francisco and obviously San Diego and the Dodgers. But yeah, good on them. Good on Buster Posey. I like Buster Posey, and yeah, glad he was able to make a so-called splash, as Mike would say. Yeah, I saw you put in the comments there, but yeah.
It's a solid enough signing.
Yeah.
I don't think the years were crazy. I don't think the money was necessarily crazy. But Willie Adames to me seems like one of those guys who will probably look back on and think, wow, it ended up being a terrible deal, only because he's one of those guys who had a career year in his contract year. Like, and I'm always a little bit suspect of guys like that. Like, he's been fine in years prior, like, solid enough for the Brewers. But this year, he flipped the switch, found another gear, and hit for much higher numbers than we're used to seeing out of him. And I just wonder, even if you take away the ballpark factor, what's the real Willie Adames? Like, is he a 30 home run hitter, or is he more of like closer to between 20 and 25? And he's fine on D, but he's not all world. So I don't know. It's one of those signings where if you're the Giants, you have to get one of these big name free agents.
Oh yeah,
finally take your money so that hopefully you can see. I mean, hell, this is probably, I'm hearing, seeing all the rumors and reading all the rumors about Corbin Burns being a top option now out there in San Francisco. It might be a Milwaukee reunion. It didn't work in Milwaukee. Maybe Burns and Adames will get back together there in San Francisco and make things happen. But this, it could have been one of those signings where it's like, look, we have to stop just being in conversations with these big names in the offseason. If it means we've got to slightly overpay for just to get one of the big names, then we go do it. And so this could be that first domino. And maybe, if they get Corbin Burns, I think I like the signing a little bit better. But if you end the offseason and it's just kind of Willie Adames, I don't really know how much better it makes the Giants. They've got a lot of issues, and you're losing Blake Snell. So, you're getting worse there. And they've got a whole host of problems. So good luck to Posey to fixing them. But this to me could go poorly in the long term. So I don't have a problem with the Giants. So more or less agree, but I know that you are a non-fan of the Giants.
Yeah, I hate them. I hate them. But again, good on them. But like we were saying, they had to spend money. And overall, the deal is not, it's not that bad if you look at it. Like you said, 7 and 182. It's not.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's not crazy for what you're getting out of him. Like I said,
how does he would have got more? To be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I was thinking closer to the 200 mark.
I was thinking
I was gonna say he came up about 20 mil short. So, and if you look at it a certain way, the Giants got kind of a deal. Again, though, we'll see how it ages out. That's where I'm not too sure about the deal. But keeping things moving, Orioles picked up a couple of backup guys. Signed Gary Sanchez the 1 year, $8 million deal to play backup catcher there. He just keeps on hitting, oddly enough. That I don't know. He won't go away. And then Tyler O'Neill finds a new home outside of Boston. There with the Orioles for 3 years, just under 50 mil. Not much to say. A little bit surprising. I was talking about this with my brother earlier, and he was confused. Just like maybe you will be, because I hadn't given it any thought until he mentioned it. But didn't the Orioles go out and get that brand new owner who was supposed to come in and, hey, we're spending money and things are different. This is no longer the Angelos family. And so far, the Orioles this is it. Like, bringing in Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez are the only moves they've made. They're down Corbin Burns at the moment, unless they somehow bring him back, which all signs point to them not.
And Santander.
And Santander. They've been mentioned, and all of these other guys, Garrett Crochet, who we'll talk about, ended up at the Red Sox. They were in conversations there. It seems like the Orioles are on the list of potential suitors for all these guys, but coming up short. Seems like if you're an Orioles fan, it's kind of like more of the same. You got these big pockets. And I'm not saying that this is, that they were going to get a Soto but they were linked to quite a few of the top name guys. Yeah. They haven't linked any of them. So it's got to be a little concerning if you're a Baltimore fan.
If you're a Baltimore fan, you got to be worried. You have to be legitimately concerned because, you've got a lot of prospects in the pipeline, but it's good luck trying to replace Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander. That's tough. That is, you're really fighting an uphill battle. I'm glad you mentioned that with the ownership, because again, that was the thing that, when the Angelos family sold, it was kind of like, thank God that they were gone And, I know Baltimore fans were rejoicing because, we got new ownership in there. It's going to spend the money. And
Yeah.
they
I think
haven't.
baseball fans, because I mean, even I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, good, yeah, that's good for baseball," and it's coming at a perfect time for the Orioles, who are they're on the ascent, and they've got all this young talent. So now they'll be able to go out and add, and in that market, and then that place, there's no reason why they shouldn't be, they're not a small market team there. So
Yeah. I mean, you've got, was it Masson? I think is what it is. Masson.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so they've got, that money coming in, man, it's right there for them. And I don't get it. I really don't. Prime opportunity for Baltimore with that young team. Oh, I just hope they don't screw it up. But there's a couple teams out there that legitimately you're kind of like, as a baseball fan, you're like, man, they're messing this one up, and Baltimore's one of them.
Yeah, maybe they'll get active in the trade market, and maybe the free agency isn't the only way to improve a team in the offseason, and there's still a lot of time between now and when pitchers and catchers report. I was reminded that the Braves, who have done dick so far this offseason, did not trade for Chris Sale, the eventual Cy Young Award winner, until January. So there's that. There's hope, and there's still plenty of time for teams like the Orioles to make moves. I'm talking myself into it, man. I don't know.
I know you are.
It's been rough.
You poor bastard. You poor bastard.
It's been rough, but I don't know. Maybe the Orioles still have time to do something. Is what I'm trying to say. So who knows what they'll ultimately end up doing. But then we moved into the big one. The biggest get of the offseason. Juan Soto signed with the Mets. You've heard about it by now. The largest contract in pro sports. It's for 15 years, $765 million to play on the other team in New York, leaving the Yankees for the Mets. Fuck. Juan Soto is back in the National League East. I thought I was rid of him potentially for good. and like herpes, he came back. So, for the next 15 years, opt out after 5 or whatever with the Mets. I will be staring across from, as a Braves fan, watching what the Mets do with Soto. I've got thoughts, but what do you think of this 15-year deal?
I mean, wow. Wow. Steve Cohen, I mean, legitimately, I think everyone as a baseball fan wishes they had an owner like Steve Cohen. I mean, sitting here, as a Reds fan, I'm like, damn, I would love to have Steve Cohen as my owner, but he was not going to be outbid. That was his guy. He had his sights set on Juan Soto. And the crazy part is listening to the way it kind of played out, that going into that day, what day was that? Sunday. That earlier in the
first day of free agents, or the first day of the winter meetings.
Yeah. So earlier that day, the Yankees were the favorite, and it was kind of one of those situations to where he was going to be going back to the Yankees, and then kind of got back to Steve Cohen, and he was like, "No, not a chance. We'll go the 15. We'll add the extra $5 million," because the Yankees offered, was it 16 and 760?
Yeah,
and which is, my God, absurd too. I mean, I will say this in terms of the contracts that everyone's all concerned about, that this is absurd for baseball. And I heard Jim Bowden talk about it, on the radio at the winter meetings. He was like, the Ohtani contract and the Soto contract, those are one-offs. This is not going to be the normal. You might see Elly De La Cruz $800-900 million, as he continues to develop. Who knows when his contract is up here in Cincinnati? But, regardless, to get the winter meetings kicked off that way, kicked ass. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, it was just kind of, I was, laying in bed, and then that news broke. I was like, oh, Jesus, like, just freaking awesome.
Yeah, well, I was hit by
I
a
know
ton
you
of
hated
pranks
it, but
Monday morning. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I mean, good for the Mets, good for Juan Soto getting the bag. I think a 15-year contract is stupid.
oh, it's absurd.
Yeah, I don't.
You're eating 5. You're eating 5 to 7 years of that. I mean,
Yeah,
legitimately,
yeah, and I mean,
he's
the
mediocre
Braves were
defensively.
never right. The Braves were never a real contender for Juan Soto, but I wouldn't want my team now. If you're the Mets and you have Steve Cohen and money is no object, then great. But for most franchises, like I think there's like two they could really legit stomach these deals. Like it's just playing in a whole different pool. Like it's not even.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's funny money, and so I laugh at the length. The number, the amount of money is what it is. It's the going rate for the thing. But yeah, once you start breaking it down with the player, I love Juan Soto. I think he's great for the game. Good guy. Like, he's never got in trouble. By all accounts, everybody in baseball seems to love him. I do not have a problem with the player, the guy. But
I don't either, yeah.
15 years, even at 26 years of age, is just it's asinine. Like I can't imagine signing a guy for that long. There's too many things that can go wrong, and that's if he was athletic as an
exactly,
or could pitch like Shohei. Like if Shohei had gotten this money, this is the type of money, because it got towards the end there where it was pushing 800, and then by the end, we learned 7, and really, and actual present day value ended up being like 4. The idea that Juan Soto, as much as I love him as a player, is making so much more than Shohei is kind of absurd to me. Like I can't fathom paying a guy who may have to be a DH in a few years because he can't really play the outfield all that great. They hid him in New York, over on the other side of town. They specifically said, yeah, we're going to put him in right field because we think it's easier for him to play defense there. And sure enough, he was a finalist for a Gold Glove, so they were right, which says a lot more about the Gold Glove metrics than it does anything else.
Bingo, exactly, yeah.
But I mean, the fact that they openly said, hey, we're going to hide this guy because we know he's not that great at defense, $50 million for a bat, it's just... And see, in baseball, and in this, in baseball, just one guy, it just isn't going to do it. Like, exactly. If the Mets all get hurt tomorrow and it's just Juan Soto in that lineup, there's nothing he can do. And for a guy who until last year, he's been, he gets his home runs, but he's not really known as a upper echelon home run hitter. He was kind of, more in that second tier. And then with the short porch and, Yankee Park again, kind of in a free agent year, hitting, as many home runs as he did in a smaller ballpark and inflated those numbers. I just wonder, like, what are the Mets actually getting? Like, we know that he'll be a really good hitter. We know that he has a great eye. His on-base percentage is going to be great.
He's the best hitter in the game. But
yeah, like $50 million for to watch a guy get on base. If there's nobody to drive him in, what good does it do you? And he can't play defense. He doesn't steal bases. I know there's going to be Mets fans that just say it's haterism, but it's a slightly insane deal for the player. Good for the team and the fans, because they're just starving for a championship. So they don't care. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's not my money or their money or whatever, so it doesn't really matter. But if for some reason, at some point everybody has a limit. And we saw where Cohen pulled back off of spending after he had given all that money out to Scherzer and Verlander. He pulled back because he had all that money tied up in them and then had to wait until this year when all that money came off the books to go and do this again. Yeah. Well, when this contract, because it's not if, it's when this contract becomes an albatross, well, if the Mets haven't won a World Series by that time, then our fans is thrilled with it because then you're stuck with that contract. You have to do another creative deal like they did to get rid of those 2 contracts where you have to eat a bunch of it and you're hamstrung.
And nobody's taking that on.
Right. And so
nobody will like
it's great now, but you better go win one. That's the thing. Like this deal says, I mean, and not that Cohen has said anything, but like, it's World Series championship or bust, but it's like, you have to have to win a championship when you sign this deal. And because there's no guarantees and because the Mets haven't done it since 86, good luck to them. Also, I'll be rooting against them every step of the fucking way.
Oh, no doubt you will.
I
No
hope
doubt you will.
well,
But as
I
someone
hope that in 3 years this deal looks horrible.
So your hate for New York is just amazing. Like Mets and Yankees, it's awesome. It's awesome. But as a fan outside of who could care less about,
Mike pointing out that it's so many so many cheesy gordita crunches. The other night on Craft Brewed Sports, Mike broke down the contract multiple different times just by how many random things that he'd be able to buy for his new contract.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Great numbers. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, you're good. But as a guy, who could care less about, the Mets, like I don't have the, the rivalry like you do.
Sure.
But yeah, to me, it's great. Like seeing all the videos online of like, yeah, we got them and they were all excited like that. To me, that's awesome. Like, good for the Mets. They made a hell of a run this year in the playoffs, making it to the NLCS. Great ball club, but again, one guy's not going to do it. They do have some work to do. And, Steve Cohen knows that, and he's obviously not afraid to spend the money. And I think I saw something that the payroll they had last year, they still have I want to say to match what they were at
they're
last year.
$50 million under it right now, I believe.
Yeah, it was 50 or 60 under. And I was like, my God, they can go get, you can go get a Bregman to shore up your infield. You can go get another.
Well, and they're still in contact with their own Pete Alonso. There's still a chance that he comes back. But, unfortunately, as a Braves fan from the outside looking in, I've seen this coming for a few years now. And in fact, the Juan Soto thing, this has been talked about for 2 years.
Yeah.
Because the minute he got traded away from DC, from DC, it was, well, San Diego's never going to be able to keep him. So, and the sites again, everybody pointed to the fact that all of this money was coming off the books for the Mets, and that the Mets were going. It's been heavily rumored that Cohen was going for this. He was going to have the money. The writing was on the wall, and funny enough, it's rare that you actually see it play out. Like a lot of times, the teams set themselves up for this, and then a guy signs a deal early or unexpectedly signs a deal with somebody that, hadn't been talked about or whatever. But the Mets pulled this off, and it was a couple years in the making. And, it sucks because, like I said, it was kind of nice when they were hamstrung by those other deals. And it's like, well, now unlimited money bags does have a stopping point, but now the brakes are off. And so he can do whatever he wants. You're right. They can add a number of other pieces. I know initially they were in heavy favorites to land Corbin Burns. I haven't heard much about him there, but I think that's the thing now when you look at the Mets. If you don't bring back Alonso, which again, you've signed this deal with Soto, you probably should.
Well, I was going to ask
losing a Alonso and adding Soto, I don't know how much better that makes them.
So
realistically,
I need you to do me a favor here.
Take my Mets hater hat off.
Take and be a real baseball GM on this one. What moves would you make now, knowing you've got, we'll say 60 to 70 million available to, knowing you just brought in Soto for $51 million a year. What moves would you make now to help shore up that lineup?
I would do exactly what I just said. I feel like if you go all in on Soto, then you might as well go all in on who's left at the top of the pitching, because one of the dominoes fell there. Corbin Burns. You go spend the money on Burns. You bring Burns in to top that rotation. All of a sudden, that shores up a very shaky part of their team. Because, who's their ace right now? Who is the Mets' ace right now? They don't really have one. Unless you think Senga, unless you think Senga is an ace who didn't pitch all year, most of last year due to injury, and only has one full year under his belt, I don't know that he's necessarily an ace, but he's heading your rotation right now on paper. You go get Burns and you bring back Alonso. You can't, after Alonso, what he did to end the season, what he means to that city, what a relationship he has with the fans, all of that. You don't bring in a Soto and then lose an Alonso, because again, I don't know how much better it makes you by losing Alonso. Obviously, Soto is the better hitter. But is he that much better in terms of run producing and all that? Like, I mean, Alonso hit his fair share of bombs. Yeah, there's a giant chasm when you're talking about on base percentage and average, but power wise and RBI wise and all that stuff, you know, you're not getting any stolen bases out of Soto. You're not getting any stolen bases. Like, they're very similar in their production at the end of the day. And protection is still going to be needed for Soto. I mean, you still have to make sure that Soto's pitched to.
Well,
right
that's
now,
my
they don't
thing.
really have anybody that can stop that.
I mean, Lindor is your guy back there. Like, is that
Lindor's
really
leading off? I mean, so you're going to have Lindor lead
But that's
off.
what I'm saying. Lindor is your only guy that you've got in that lineup
Right,
outside.
you're right, and that could even fill that role, but he's going to be in front of him.
Exactly.
So you
Now,
really don't
would
have
you?
protection.
So it's seemingly like, and I obviously I'm not in the know right now, full blown on this, but it's seemingly like it sounds like numbers wise that Alonso isn't going to get what he had, I guess, expected. That's kind of like the vibe that I had heard. Would you go and would you try to bring in a Bregman as well along with Alonso?
I mean,
because that'll really shore up your lineup, knowing you're bringing in Alex Bregman, who is, I mean, that's about as solid as you're going to get. Sure, as your infield.
I maybe, but the only reason I pause is because I do like Mark Vientos a lot. They've got that young third baseman there, and I don't know. And I'm not paying Bregman 200. If Bregman wants 200, like he's been seeking, I'm not paying him that. I'd be more comfortable paying him what Willie Adames got. Like we could talk 180.
I was going to say, but I don't think Bregman's going to get 2.
I know, but I'm saying he's been looking for 2, and that's part of the reason.
He's expecting 2, but I don't think he's going to.
And so if he comes down off that number, sure. But I'm not. If I'm New York, I'm not hard pressed for him. You know, like he would be a luxury item after the priority would be Burns and Alonso for sure.
Yeah.
And then if Bregman is still there, you could get him on a deal that you feel comfortable with. Fine. But again, with Mark Vientos there, I think he's in a position to take the next step, play solid enough third base, and with Bregman, I'm not sure how much longer he has at third base. He's already talked about potentially moving positions to facilitate, being on whatever team he's at. And I could see him being one of those guys that does have to shift to first base, sometime soon.
Yeah.
And so then you're stuck with him, Alonso, and Soto. All guys, right? All guys that are going to have to need to DH and not play the field as much. So I don't want to hem that up anymore. If I have Alonso and Soto, Bregman, it doesn't make all the sense in the world unless I get him for under my terms. So
fair enough. Scott, I want to say I'm proud of you. You did.
I can talk this. I can talk this all day without my hater sunglasses on.
I've never seen it. That's the first time I've ever seen it. I've known you a couple years now, man. Never seen it.
I just don't like to. Okay, you're welcome. Moving on from Soto because it's insane, but it's done, and that was the domino that basically started it all. In the past few years, we talked about Shohei, but it wasn't just the Shohei free agency. It's been like 2 or 3 prior to that where the top of the food chain hasn't signed until real late, which means everybody else kind of sits on their hands until the market gets at the top guy. So Juan Soto falls. Then we have Jordan Romano sign a deal with the Phillies, coming off of injury, shore up the back end of that bullpen style enough. Tigers getting Alex Cobb on a 1-year deal. Again, coming off of injury, it should be solid enough for the Tigers. Then the heartbreaker, the ultimate just gut punch to me. I have known for just about as long as Juan Soto leaving DC that the writing was on the wall that Max Fried was no longer going to be an Atlanta Brave, but for the love of fucking God. There were 3 places that it was just not going to be okay with me watching him go. One, very much so, more than any of the others in the entire league, and that's the New York Yankees. And Max Fried is a New York Yankee.
Yes.
8 years, $218 million.
Which again, holy shit.
Not tip top because
absurd.
not the tip top because I would argue that Burns, just numbers wise and age, probably the top. But Fried underrated throughout most of his career, just goes about his business quiet, stays relatively healthy. He has had injuries recently that I'm going to talk about and why I wouldn't have signed this deal. But as consistent as they come, great just in the clubhouse, in the media. I've loved Max so much since he came from San Diego in the trade. I remember when they traded for him, and it was like, who the hell is Max Fried? But ever since he came to Atlanta, and that was when they were, they had first started the rebuild. He was one of the earlier pitchers. And
what trade was he a part of?
He was part of the trade that sent the Upton brother and Craig Kimbrell and Justin Upton and Craig Kimbrell when they were when they were rebuilding, they offloaded salary. That was a part of that salary dump. Max Fried came back in that trade. He was the jewel of that piece. I think he was in the minors, and I don't believe even came up until like the following year after the trade, or at least no, I take that back, because when Max first came up, he was in the bullpen. And he was in the back end of the bullpen for a little while there, and they deployed him out of the bullpen.
What? I remember that.
He pitched the bullpen the first couple times they were in the playoffs.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so, then, they made him a full-blown starter, and they took off from then. Obviously, pitched Game 6 of the World Series. He's a hero. I own his jersey, and this one hurts. It fucking hurts to see him sign with the Yankees. But all that being said, I wouldn't have done it. I am very happy that Alex Anthopoulos, the GM for the Braves, did not go to 8 years. And if that's what it took to get a Max Fried, and we know that there were a couple other teams, the Red Sox being one of them, that were willing to go to 7 8 years, I'm not doing it for a starting pitcher. Not in this environment, not for a 31-year-old pitcher. And as much as I love Max, he's had forearm trouble the last couple of years. He's always had blister trouble throughout his career, and the blisters, they come and they go, and it may not be long-term thing. But either way, age and injury potential. I don't like the elbow stuff and the forearm stuff, because he's already had Tommy John once, and he's about at that time where that Tommy John could expire, as far as him maybe potentially needing a second. And 8 years from now, I think that this deal looks just absolutely horrendous. I think for the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to get peak Max, and then it's just going to go all downhill. I wish nothing but the worst for the Yankees on this deal, but nothing but the best for Max.
See, there's the hater part that I'm used to seeing. You know what this is though?
What?
Panic signing. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, 8 years for Max Fried. Again, I'm a Max Fried fan as well. I love Max. I think he's solid as hell. Not a chance for 8 years and over $200 million for Max. I'm not doing it. And again, it was a panic signing. They missed out on Soto, so oh god, we have to pivot real quick, and let's overpay and dish out a lot of years for a 31-year-old left-handed pitcher.
You know what makes it extra funny is that the day before this signing happened, and this was in between Soto and Max signing, Cashman came out and said, we're not going to panic. We're not just going to sign guys to sign guys. We're still active in free agency, but we're not going to make any rash moves, more or less.
Bullshit.
And like less than 24 hours later, this deal went down, and I chuckled to myself, because I'm like, it's the Yankees and it's Cashman. And I'm sure he hears people saying, like, probably, the rumblings that are calling for his job a little bit. I mean, yes, they made the World Series this year. Yes, he made the move to get Juan Soto and all that. But you take away last year, I mean, the Yankees were kind of a mess and kind of in a bad spot. And losing Soto, now going back to the problems that they had before with not having anything but Judge in that offense. And while Max is good, he doesn't necessarily like their problem wasn't front end starting pitching, and they've got that. And they had pretty solid pitching for the most part. Again, Max isn't gonna. It doesn't hurt to have a Max Fried, but at 8 years and $200 million, there's just way better ways to spend the money. And why wouldn't that money? Why wouldn't you push? I don't know what the final contract numbers are going to be for Corbin Burns, but that's who I'd spend the money on. If I'm gonna spend the money, if I'm the Yankees, I'm gonna go for the top guy, the younger guy, and I'm gonna bite the bullet and pay it. I'm not gonna overpay for the second guy on free agency who, is what, 4 or 5 years older than Corbin Burns. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems kind of weird and desperate, and I don't know how much better it makes the Yankees. In fact, you lose Soto, and I really think they're just going to take a step back. Not just from the World Series, but just being in that conversation of like being able to win it all. Like it's like, okay, now this makes them more in line with the rest of the pack.
Yeah, I mean for the Yankees to even be back into that conversation, you got to go get a Santander. You got to go get a Bregman.
Yeah,
you have to.
You got to add some offensive juice.
Yeah, I mean Max Fried's not going to do it for you after losing Juan Soto. So, I mean it's tough, but and they panicked. That's just an irrational move there, for the Yankees. It made me laugh at the end. I was just
it did not make you laugh because you're too busy laughing at my pain.
Well, no, it was because it was karma, because your hatred for the Yankees and like literally it was destined to happen. Now, me being a good friend, I did check in on you mentally. How many times?
At least 3 that I can remember.
I was like, mental health check. How you doing? You're like, well, 1, it was kill me now. 2, I hate my life. And 3,
the toaster and the toaster in the bathtub.
Yeah, the toaster. Yeah. Live, laugh, toaster bath, Scott. There you go.
Yeah, it just sucks. Just
it does.
Being a fan and guys that are with your team for a long time, and you see them come up from their beginnings and get all this point. Yeah. It sucks losing anybody like that, but it sucks even worse when they go to your arch nemesis. Like,
it's going to be like that when we lose Ellie De La Cruz. I mean, because Ellie's not re-signing here. I mean, let's be real. So when Ellie go, hopefully he doesn't go, but hell, shit's sake, he might be a Yankee. He might be a Dodger. Like, that's going to suck, but I've got a couple years to prepare
for that.
Yeah, because that one's going to hurt.
Let me tell you, look, well, it sucks. And even when it's coming too, because I mean, the Freddie Freeman thing happened with the Dodgers. And again, kind of saw that coming. There was a much better chance at the time that he could end up back in Atlanta, but there was always that chance. And then the minute he signed with the Dodgers, it was, okay, so what's happening with Fried? And that was 3 years ago when that happened. And it was with each passing year, it became less likely. When they, by the time it got to this season, the writing was on the wall. If Atlanta was going to re-sign Max, it would have already happened. Yeah. They would have already, and they had been exchanging numbers. And I knew that this was coming. Doesn't make it any easier, and it makes it that much harder when he goes to the Mets or to the Yankees. I mean, can you imagine going to the Mets? Oh God, geez, that would, because then the Mets, like the Mets having gotten Soto and Fried, that would have just been, that'd have been too much. I don't know if I'd have been able to do this show. I'm not gonna lie.
And then because you're a trooper.
Well, yes,
you battled through it.
I'd have taken my lumps. Then moving on to a trade of a second tier name, but an all-star caliber level name. And the Guardians traded Andres Gimenez to the Blue Jays, who, Chris is a Blue Jays guy, follows the Blue Jays a lot. And we have spent a lot of this offseason chatting amongst ourselves about how the Blue Jays have really just fallen off. The last couple of winners missed on much like the Giants. They missed on Shohei. They've missed on guys that they've, been reportedly the highest bidder for or have gone really hard after, have not been able to land them. They get Gimenez here. Not a game changer, a solid, middle infielder, all-star caliber, but Blue Jays need help, man. And they need a lot of it. You talk about this trade for your beloved Blue Jays.
I mean, I like it. It's a great move, and to give up Spencer Horwitz, solid first baseman, but got to do what you got to do. But bringing in, Gimenez, I like. It's going to be a great move, but it's got to be followed up with other moves.
Hmm.
Right now they're, it sounds like they can't, we say it, but that they are one of the top, suitors for Corbin Burns. Well, that we've heard that before, and we've seen how it's played out. So if that's the case, great. They need, bringing in a Corbin Burns would be massive. Anthony Santander would be another massive addition. Here's the problem. None of this is going to matter anyway if you don't bring back Vladdy, or Bo. I mean, Bo, I can see, heading out the door, but Vladdy, oh my God, you simply cannot, you can't fumble this one. And right now, Toronto is doing their damnedest at fumbling it, and it's just, for a team that represents an entire country like the Blue Jays do, this is, another offseason where they have, literally sat on their hands and done nothing. Last year you had the so-called unicorn budget for Ohtani, and then you did literally nothing else after that. And it's so incredibly frustrating to see how this has played out each and every year when Vlad Guerrero should have been signed already long term. Now he's going to command a ton of change. And to me, Bo Bichette should have been re-signed. These moves had to have been made prior. But now your problem is you've got a front office and Ross Atkins and such who are literally on a one-year contract. So they're done after this year. I believe John Schneider, the manager, is on a one-year deal. It is baffling to me that this is the way Toronto has handled it. Now, I miss the days, and Scott, I've told you this numerous times, when Anthopoulos was in Toronto. Freaking loved Alex Anthopoulos in Toronto because, again, he wasn't afraid to make any moves or anything like that. And I guarantee if Alex Anthopoulos was, at the helm, we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about right now. But this is a crucial offseason again for the Toronto Blue Jays, and they have yet to make any significant dent. I will, like I said, the trade for Andres Gimenez, solid deal. But there's other moves that have to be made, and Toronto has got to get going on it. Otherwise, you wonder what this franchise is going to look like in the next, year or two, because you're going to have to trade Vladdy. You're going to have to trade Bo. And that's just asinine to even think about, and what the Blue Jays are going to look like, without those guys in there. Again, I see Bo being gone. If Toronto was smart, they could deal him for either prospects or other major league ready talent. But Vladdy's got to stay. I mean, he has to stay. So that's just another piece that has to be secured if you're the Toronto Blue Jays. And again, among other moves, bringing in a top pitcher and, again, a solid outfielder like a Santander would be the perfect offseason for the Toronto Blue Jays. But I'm not feeling confident, man. It's not looking good. They continue again to sit back and do nothing. I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll keep an eye on how the Blue Jays kind of operate, because again, still, there's still time in this offseason for them to kind of turn things around. But
I'm giving up.
Yeah, I mean, the writing seems to be kind of on the wall. Moving back to the Rangers, who made a couple of other moves. They re-signed Nathan Eovaldi, who everybody kind of expected to be gone. I personally was hoping he would land in Atlanta, a modest 3-year, $70 million deal to keep him in Texas there, which good move, even if they, have some starting pitching. He was one of their more stable guys the last couple of years, stayed healthy enough when compared to the rest of their rotation. So somebody that they didn't want to lose. And then they also added Jake Burger to the fold, trading with the Marlins to bring him in there. A guy who's got 30-plus home run power, another solid bat there. Be interesting to see where he kind of fits in. He did play some first base there while with the Marlins, but more known to play third base. And I know that they've got what's his name down there?
Josh Young.
Yeah, Josh Young. But again, Josh Young struggles with health, so we'll see how that goes. And then over at and then over at first, the always enigma Nathaniel Lowe, who can't sometimes can hit for power, but oftentimes doesn't. So this gives them a little bit more pop in that lineup. So solid moves for Texas.
Solid move. Yeah.
Solid. Nothing outstanding, but just solid. And then yesterday, finally, after months and months of speculation and talk about it, another one of the bigger names in the trade market comes off the board. Garrett Crochet of the White Sox gets traded to the Red Sox. Where we heard that before, a White Sox ace level starter going to the Red Sox, shades of Chris Sale. And the Red Sox, they sent quite the haul over to the White Sox. This is one of those deals that if you are the White Sox or if you are any team rebuilding, that you absolutely salivate over. The White Sox get the number 25 prospect in all of baseball, Kyle Teal, catcher from the Red Sox, and then Braden Montgomery, Chase Madroth, and another reliever on the back end. An absolutely insane package for just really only 1 year of Garrett Crochet, because this is the first time he's been able to stay healthy. Now, granted, it was an amazing year, and his potential is off the charts. And if he can stay healthy, what an amazing get for the Red Sox, who, much like some of the teams we've spoken a lot of, they needed to do something. The Red Sox have fallen back into some of the same things that some of these other teams have, where they just haven't spent or they haven't made many moves, and they've kind of tried to live on the fringes. And for a team that used to go toe-to-toe with the Yankees every offseason, dollar for dollar, often overspending on guys that they had no business paying for, but just to keep up with, New York. It's nice to see them get back in the headlines. Still a long way to go. I mean, Garrett Crochet doesn't turn their fortunes around a ton, because they've got a lot they need to fix there in Boston. But I like the move for both sides, because, again, if you're the White Sox, Garrett Crochet doesn't do nothing for you long term. They're going to lose him to free agency in the next 2 years anyway. And when you're a rebuilding team, what good does it do? But bringing in the number 25 prospect in baseball and a couple other guys who have very promising outlooks. I love this move for the White Sox almost more than I do for the Red Sox.
I would say this is a perfect deal for both teams. I tweeted it out, from the Backwards K account, that as soon as it happened, I said, man, it's a hell of a price to pay, but it's a great deal for both teams. Getting Kyle Teal, catcher from Virginia, the kid's phenomenal. Obviously he's going to headline it, but it's the addition of Braden Montgomery, I think that's the one that is going to be the key for the White Sox. Braden Montgomery, solid outfielder, prospect coming in. Like him and Teal are the two that are, they're the headliners of this deal, obviously outside of Crochet, but I look at this and I'm like, thank God the Reds did not make that move for Garrett Crochet. I mean, I look at that prospect package, and it's, word's coming out that the Reds were one of the finalists for that. It just, obviously, Boston had a little more to give, and they did. They paid heavy, but, as the saying goes, prospects are cool, but parades are cooler. I get it. And, good on the Red Sox for not prospect hugging. To bring in a great starter like a Garrett Crochet, who, again, coming off of injury, one solid year, who what you can get from him if he just can stay healthy is the key thing. This would be a great move for Boston. But on the flip side of it, for the White Sox who have to rebuild, and all last year we made fun of them, for how bad they were. A move like this really does help, get things kind of, back on the right track, per se. But solid deal for both teams. And Boston was able to keep major league talent, and that was I think the key thing for them was not getting rid of any, major league players from the roster or in the system or anything like that. In this deal, they did get rid of top prospects, but again, prospects are prospects. But yeah, I like the deal for both teams. Great job.
John asking, is the Yankees going to get Bellinger and Tucker? Which brings me to, now that we've kind of wrapped up all the moves,
Yeah.
let's talk about the trade rumors that are out there. He mentioned Bellinger, which the Cubs 1 year after probably regretting re-signing him after the first time they signed him an off season ago. He's been rumored to be out there, but Kyle Tucker, a huge name that kind of popped up within the last few days. The Astros are in talks to deal a Kyle Tucker. Similar situation to a Juan Soto was with DC. The writing's on the wall for Houston. They've probably already tried to engage in conversations with Tucker and haven't gotten very far. And he only has 2 years left on his deal. I thought that them not re-signing Bregman was because they plan to, dedicate that money to a Kyle Tucker, but it looks like no, they have no plans to. So Kyle Tucker could be on the move. And another name that also, since the winter meetings have started, has gotten real hot and has opened up his want to be moved by putting out the teams that he would be okay with being traded to, is Nolan Arenado of the St. Louis Cardinals. He has a list of like 6 teams, the usual 6: Yankees, Dodgers, Padres, the usual suspects. But his agent was given permission by the Cardinals to help try to facilitate a trade. Trade has not happened on this show, or as we do this show now. But another name that could potentially be on the move, and again, health notwithstanding, could make an impact. But I wish that the Kyle Tucker thing is huge. I like Kyle Tucker a lot. Like I said, I'm slightly surprised that Houston is willing to move off of him, but I don't believe that a Kyle Tucker is going to come cheap. So if Garrett Crochet commanded the type of package that he is, I feel like Kyle Tucker, not only are you getting back major league talent, which is apparently what Houston's looking for, I feel like you're going to get a pretty decent return for 2 years of Kyle Tucker.
You're getting a healthy haul. Like it's going to be, it's going to be a solid return for a Kyle Tucker. And that's why, I had heard the Reds had checked in on all these outfielders. Taylor Ward was one. That I had heard. Obviously, they had Luis Robert is another, but neither one of those guys are going to cost as much as Kyle Tucker will. And as great as it would be to see him, mash a Great American Ballpark, not a chance. I'm not one that's going to be, oh no, we're not trading the prospects, but I ain't trading the prospects for that. To me, it's going to cost too much. Hell of a player. But for 2 years, you could probably talk me into it. For 2 years, 2 years of Kyle Tucker, but knowing you're not going to re-sign him, but man, whoo.
It would be fun. It would be fun. And when you talk about filling the outfield hole that Cincinnati has been trying to fill, all off season and all basically for like a year now, that would be quite the way to fill it. I imagine it sounds like he's going to end up in either New York or Chicago. They're the heavy favorites at the moment. The Cubs and the Yankees are heavily involved in those conversations. And ironically enough, if the Cubs were to land Tucker, that might then facilitate the trade of Bellinger from the Cubs to the Yankees. So the Yankees could end up getting the consolation prize from the Cubs, who win the big prize in Tucker. It would actually be pretty funny if that's how that whole thing went down. But we'll kind of keep an eye on that over the next few weeks.
Well, to me, that's kind of how that would have to play out, because I don't think the Yankees have what it takes to get that deal done. Like that, like I said, it's gonna be it's gonna be a return. Like it'll be a haul.
Yeah, they could, not without gutting themselves, but it would be more interesting, I think, to see the Bellinger. Like, how hard are they going after Bellinger prior to Tucker is what I guess I'm asking. It's just like, will they they're kind of just like settling for Bellinger at that point,
I
right?
mean, Chicago offers more.
Well, and then if you're
Houston
Chicago, it's like you can deal a Bellinger, and I don't think that's necessarily hurting because I don't think they should have signed the deal anyway. So I think that's actually a net gain if they get rid of Bellinger, independent of getting Tucker. Like if you get rid of Bellinger and add Tucker, that's amazing. But it would just be kind of funny that the same team that's also pursuing Tucker would then turn around and ask you for Bellinger because, hey, we didn't get Tucker. So it would just be kind of ironic if that's how the whole thing plays out. And then, to kind of wrap things up here before we get out of here, we mentioned it and we've talked about it. Roki Sasaki was posted from Japan. He is officially out there for any team to sign. We have no idea. All signs point to, and all the talk has been, he won't be signing until closer to January 15th, which is like the deadline for when he would have to, go back to his original team or whatever.
That's when the international pool money
flips over.
Resets. So, yeah.
And then that's what all of these teams are having to use for, signing him because he can sign to a minor league deal, but it costs your international pool money. So we'll see where he ends up, but there are heavy rumors out there that big shocker, he likes the Dodgers.
He's going to San Diego.
Well, I hope that he's going to San Diego.
He's going to San Diego.
San Diego is making a very hard push for him. And that's the other, at the end of the day, I feel like it's a 90% game of if you're it's like recruiting. If you're a West Coast team, you're automatically at an advantage for these Asian guys because it's so much easier for them to get home and for their home to be able to watch them play and follow them with the time zone and the travel and all of that stuff. So inherently, like, now, Sasaki could sign with anybody. It's not like, it's just like Ohtani. But I feel like those teams are, and, we saw Senga. He signed with the Mets. You do have some of these guys come in and sign with other teams. But I'm fairly certain that Sasaki is going to end up on the West Coast one way or the other. I hope to God that you're right, though. I would love to see him as a San Diego Padre and not a Los Angeles Dodger.
Well, he's got that relationship with Yu Darvish to where, it is like a very tight relationship. That's why I'm leaning.
Yeah. Well, and I'm
leaning San Diego.
I've heard that San Diego has made a very hard push for him.
Well, because if you think about it, he's going to be, the limelight, in terms of Japanese players on the Dodgers there. That dude, I'm not saying he wants to have all the spotlight on him.
He gets kind of lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, he totally gets lost in the shuffle behind. But one thing, where were you going after? What were you going to talk about after this? Because
I was gonna open up things because at that point, that's everything's kind of left there. We've gone through all of the trades and big name free agency settings. So the only question left was where do we see? I guess the biggest names left. So Burns and those types. Where do we see these guys landing?
Well, it's interesting because I was just going to say I was reading, I got an alert report. The Mariners are fielding more trade calls about Luis Castillo.
I did see that just before the show started.
So, there was a lot of talk out there about who was it that I'm spacing out here. The deal where they were wanting, was it like Gilbert? I can't remember. Shit. Oh, man.
Oh, Philadelphia was trying to trade Alec Boehm. And Philadelphia was trying to trade Alec Boehm. And there was rumors that they had asked for one of Gilbert and or what's his name at the top there?
I know.
But either way, either one of the top two pitchers in Seattle.
Yeah. And but they were talking, that Seattle had been more open to discuss Luis Castillo. And that's one, so just kind of looking at it, the Red Sox were discussing a trade with the Mariners on Wednesday involving one of their starting pitchers. Looks like Yankees, Cubs, Orioles, Phillies, that they would be a perfect fit. Castillo's 32. It'd be interesting to see what Seattle does because they are in desperate need of a bat. So, man, what could you do on that one? I mean, really, it's going to come down to any of these teams that strike out on Corbin Burnes.
Yeah.
It's I expected there to be a little more movement at the winter meetings, but I think after the Soto deal, and I heard some people were saying there was just a lot of fatigue afterwards. My God, it was just wow, because we saw nothing on Monday. Not nothing, but we saw very little movement on Monday.
League-wide shell shock.
Yeah, and then it just and I think traction's starting to pick up again, and you're really starting to see, teams now pivot. And when you got two big guys out there in terms of Corbin Burnes and Santander on the market as your outfielder, your power bat, and I guess you could throw Alonso in there, but he's really kind of, he hasn't been talked about much. The names really are Burnes and Santander are the two that are really out there.
Yeah, I think because the assumption is that he's just going to go back to the Mets. But I also think some of these emerging names like a Kyle Tucker and whatnot that kind of showed up on the trade market that weren't necessarily there at the beginning of free agency has kind of made it so that you push back an Alonso a little bit. Like if I can get a Kyle Tucker in a deal, I'm doing that before I sign a Pete Alonso.
Well, the trade market is really blown up, but it kind of blew up over the weekend, really kind of getting it going, because then you saw that the Reds were, I keep bringing up the Reds, but those are the rumors that, they've just been consistent here, but being in on Josh Naylor and Lane Thomas, so that came out of nowhere. But the trade market is really, it's kind of exploded. It's adding a lot of intrigue, because some of these teams, the Reds aren't going to be in on, for example, if they want to get pitching, they weren't going to be in on a Corbin Burnes or a Max Fried. It wasn't going to happen. So what do you got to do? These kind of teams, you got to deal for it. So, and looking at the Reds, if they can't bring in a Teoscar Hernandez, which I think Teoscar would be perfect in Cincinnati. If they can't bring him in, okay, then hopefully they've talked to Santander and Teoscar and saying, hey, this is what we're looking at. Could you imagine, 81 games here at Great American Ballpark and what your numbers would look like? Kind of sell them on that part of it. But, if God forbid they strike out on one of those two, then you're going to have to fill it, another way. And it's going to have to be via a trade. So the same situation has happened here, obviously, with the Luis Castillo rumors now. Jerry Dipoto is going to make a move. It seemingly always does, and he has to bring in a bat. And the only way to do that is to deal Luis Castillo, because you're not going to get rid of, any of your top guys. It's not going to happen. They can't afford to, because those guys are under control, and I mean they're solid as all get out. So Luis Castillo is going to be that guy that's going to help you bring in a bat. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with it, especially for the teams, like I said, that struck out on bringing in a Corbin Burnes and obviously Max Fried and Garrett Crochet. Dylan Cease is another name that has been brought up on the trade market as well. So it's really, I think things are going to play out relatively quickly once Corbin Burnes decides where he's going to go.
Yeah, I think Corbin Burnes is the last big piece of this puzzle, and then everything else is just going to kind of fall in place. But I'm with you. I think that most of my interest is kind of tied up right now in what's going to happen with trades, because the Braves have done nothing, and the way Alex Anthopoulos has operated, the last couple of off seasons, is that they don't really make a big splash in free agency. They sign their own guys to long-term deals, and then they go get a Chris Sale, or they go get a Sean Murphy, whatever it may be. They go pull the trigger on a trade rather than doing it. So maybe their time is coming. Maybe I know they've been linked to Dylan Cease. They were last year before he got traded from the White Sox too. So I'm sure they've checked in on that. be interesting to see how things go, but I am much more locked into the trade rumors for the time being because, Corbin Burns, while he interests me, if he just ends up in San Francisco, I don't think it changes like the landscape all that much. So
he's a West Coast guy too, so that makes sense.
yeah, and it would be good for Buster Posey to land both in Adames and Burns, and again the Giants in general just getting back on track. Your hate notwithstanding, for them to compete in that division with the Dodgers and Padres, which they were doing regularly there for a while. So it would be nice for at least the Dodgers to have to fight to win this thing instead of just everybody rolling over for the next 7 to 8 years while Shohei's there. Like I want him to have to fucking work for it. All right. And the only way that's going to happen is if the rest of the National League gets better, but specifically the teams in their division. So hopefully San Francisco and more to the point, Buster Posey, because I am rooting for him to turn things around there.
Yeah, I do like Buster a lot.
I love Buster Posey. One of my favorite players of the last couple of decades to come out and play, and didn't get to see enough of his career. Good for him for retiring early and doing what he wanted to do, but I think we were robbed of some pretty solid years from one of the better all around players the last couple decades. So
1,000%.
I think that's gonna do it, and then that's where we should leave things. That was a lot, man. We've been away for a while, so we had quite a bit to catch up on. But when it started going fast, it didn't stop. So we enjoy this stuff. This is Chris and I's favorite time of the year in baseball, and even when people are breaking my hearts and going to the Mets and Yankees, I realize it's all a part of the show, and it's all a part of this whole big old thing. So I just grit my teeth and want to beat those sons of bitches that much more. But that's going to do it for us here on Backwards K Baseball. You can find us wherever you find all of your podcasts. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on the Impact Sports Cincinnati Network, as well as the Craft Brewed Sports Network. And you can find us on YouTube. We go live here. Oh, it's Thursday. Usually Mondays, but F it. We do it when we want. That's the best thing about doing your own show. We make the rules. And you know what? We might not see you guys again for a couple of weeks with Christmas coming, but you enjoy the family with your holidays. Enjoy the holidays with your family.
Thank God you screwed it up. We're each on the board today.
Classic. But keep it locked. You never know. We might pop in and do an emergency show. Corbin Burns signs. Things get crazy. We got another week before Christmas. Hell, I can justify doing another show if anything big happens. But keep it locked. We love baseball, and so should you. Thanks for following us. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. You guys take care. This has been Backwards K Baseball. We'll see you later.